Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The Coral Nights Festival was a kaleidoscope of color and sound, a pulse that beat through the heart of Seacrest's Coral District. Neon lights splashed across the cobblestone streets, painting the night in pinks and blues, while the salty breeze from moonlit shore carried the sizzle of food trucks, tacos, jerk chicken, and buttery popcorn mingling in the air. Street artists sketched portraits under string lights. Jazz saxophones wailed from a pop-up stage, and laughter spilled from crowds weaving through stalls of handmade jewelry and vibrant paintings. It was Seacrest at its most alive, a city that danced under the stars, where dreams felt close enough to touch. Lila Brooks, 30 and way out of her element, stood near a lemonade stand, clutching a clipboard like it was her anchor. Her teal sundress hugged her curves, the hem fluttering against her thighs in the warm breeze, catching the occasional glance from passers-by. She didn't notice. Her eyes were too busy scanning the chaos for her sister, Tiana, who'd begged her to help manage the festival for Starlight Events, the small agency where Lila worked. Lila wasn't a festival person. Her world was quieter. Art galleries with the hum of Nina Simone, late nights sketching in her tiny Starlight Grove apartment, or balancing budgets to keep her dad's medical bills at bay. But for Tiana, she'd brave anything, even this neon-soaked madness. Right now, though, Lila was regretting it. Tiana had vanished into the crowd with her camera, snapping photos for her school project, leaving Lila to dodge spilled drinks and overeager vendors. Her curls, a cascade of natural spirals, stuck to her forehead, damp from the Florida humidity, and she tucked a strand behind her ear, muttering, "Where are the signs in this place?" Her silver bracelet, engraved with the word hope, a gift from her late mother, glinted under the lights, grounding her. She needed a break, a moment to breathe. Spotting a door marked "Staff Only" behind a mural-covered wall, she sighed in relief and pushed it open, expecting a quiet corner. Instead, she stepped into a plush lounge that smelled of cedar and leather, with dim golden lights casting shadows on a sleek bar and a massive abstract painting. And there, standing by a mirror, was Evan Marshall, CEO of Marshall Resorts, though she didn't know it yet. He was fresh from a shower, a towel slung low around his hips, water droplets tracing the lines of his toned chest. His dark hair was damp, curling at the edges, and his green eyes snapped to hers, sharp and amused, pinning her in place. Lila froze, her clipboard slipping from her hands, clattering to the floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in her ears. "Oh my God! This isn't the break room!" Her voice cracked, cheeks burning hotter than the Seacrest sun. She scrambled to grab the clipboard, her dress riding up slightly, revealing a glimpse of her thigh. Evan's lips twitched, a smirk forming as he stepped closer, the towel shifting just enough to make her heart lurch. "Nope," he said, his voice low and teasing. "But you've got my attention." He leaned against the bar, unfazed by his near-nakedness, his gaze tracing her face like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. The festival's jazz faded, muffled by the walls, and for a second, it was just them. Lila, in her sundress and panic, and Evan, all confidence and bare skin. Her brain screamed, "Run!" but her feet stayed glued to the tiles. She stammered, "I'm so sorry, I need to—" Words failed her as she backed up, only to bump into a chair, her clipboard clattering again. She laughed, nervous, covering her face. "I'm a disaster." Evan's smirk softened into a grin, and he moved to help, his fingers brushing hers as he handed her the clipboard. The touch was brief but electric, sending a jolt through her. She pulled away, standing too fast, her curls falling into her eyes. "You're not a disaster," he said, his tone warm, almost daring. His eyes lingered on her lips, and Lila's breath hitched. She was suddenly aware of everything. The way the towel clung to his hips, the faint stubble on his jaw, the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in Seacrest. Her bracelet caught the light, and she clutched it, grounding herself. He's trouble, she thought. Her ex, Quentin, had been polished, promising forever until his family's disapproval shattered her. This was insanity. I'm way too old for this chaos, she said, trying to sound casual, waving at the festival beyond the door. Evan chuckled, running a hand through his damp hair. You don't look it, he replied, his voice carrying a little edge, like he was testing her. A beat of silence hung between them, charged and heavy. Lila's mind screamed to leave, but her body disagreed, drawn to the way his gaze held hers. She noticed the small details, a glass of bourbon on the bar, a stack of hotel keycards, a jazz record spinning quietly in the corner. They made him seem less like a stranger and more like a man, someone who could exist in her world. Evan gestured to the bar. Want a drink? I've got water, soda, or something stronger if you're feeling bold. His grin was pure mischief, and Lila couldn't help but laugh, the sound easing her nerves. Water's fine, she said, though her voice wavered. But I really should go. She wasn't used to this. A man's attention, especially not one who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne ad. Quentin had never made her feel like this, not even in their best days. Evan poured her a glass, his movements easy, and handed it over. You sure? You crashed my downtime. Least you could do is tell me your name. His tone was light, but his eyes were curious, searching. Lila hesitated, then said, Lila. Just Lila. She didn't mention Tiana or her job, keeping it simple, safe. Evan, he replied, though he didn't add his last name. The air felt warm, too small for both of them. She took a step toward the door, her dress swaying, catching his eye again. I'll let you get back to whatever CEOs do, she said, half smiling. He laughed, a rich sound that made her stomach flip, mostly just waiting for interesting people to barge in. Lila's laugh escaped before she could stop it, bright and unguarded. For a moment she felt lighter, younger, like the girl who used to sketch sunsets in Starlight Grove. But reality snapped her back. Tiana was out there, probably texting her friends about the festival. She opened the door, the jazz flooding in. Good luck with your night, she said, glancing back. Evan was still watching, his expression softer now, like he was memorizing her. Thanks, Lila, he said. Maybe I'll see you out there. She nodded, doubting it, and slipped into the crowd, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't name. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the music, or the way the neon painted the night, or the fact that she hadn't felt this alive in years. She turned back, just for a second, and Evan was there, leaning against the doorframe, his eyes locked on her. Before she could think, she was moving back through the door, closing the distance between them. Evan straightened, surprised, but he didn't hesitate. Their lips met in a kiss that was all heat and hunger, a collision of two worlds that shouldn't have fit, but did. His hands found her waist, gentle but firm, and Lila's fingers grazed his jaw, the stubble rough under her touch. The kiss deepened, and she let herself fall, her clipboard forgotten on the floor. Lila, he murmured against her lips, a question, a plea. She pulled back, eyes wide, her breath ragged. I can't believe I'm doing this, she whispered, but her hands stayed on his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart. Evan's smirk returned, but his eyes were soft, almost reverent. I'm not complaining, he said, his voice low. He kissed her again, slower, and the room seemed to shrink, the festival fading to a distant hum. Her bracelet slipped from her wrist, clinking to the floor, but she didn't care. His towel fell, and she laughed, a sound that turned to a gasp as he pulled her closer, their bodies pressing together. They moved to a plush rug by the window, the city lights casting a golden glow over them. His hands traced her curves, reverent, peeling away her dress to reveal skin that glowed in the dim light. Lila felt exposed, not just her body, but her heart, every scar and stretch mark a story she'd hidden. But Evan's touch was a balm, his lips brushing her shoulder, whispering, "You're beautiful, Lila, every damn inch." Their lovemaking was slow, deliberate, a dance of heat and trust, each touch a vow, each sigh a confession. In that moment she was just Lila, alive and wanted, not a sister, a daughter, or a woman judged by the world. When it was over, they lay tangled on the rug, the city humming below. Evan's arm draped over her waist, his breath warm against her neck. "Stay," he whispered, but dawn was creeping in, and reality hit like a wave. Lila slipped from his arms, pulling on her dress, her heart racing. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "This was a mistake." She grabbed her clipboard, not noticing her bracelet left behind, and fled, the door slamming shut. Back in the festival, Lila's cheeks burned as she wove through the crowd, her mind replaying the night. What was that? She was a sister, a planner, not some reckless dreamer. But Evan's touch lingered, warm and insistent, like a song she couldn't shake. She found Tiana near a mural, snapping photos, oblivious to her sister's racing heart. "You okay, Lila?" Tiana asked, her braids swinging. Lila forced a smile, tucking her curls behind her ear. "Yeah, sweetie, just tired." At Sapphire Wave, Evan stood by the window, holding Lila's bracelet, the word hope catching the light. His team was prepping for a gala pitch, but all he could think about was her laugh, the way her dress hugged her, the way she'd loved him like it was a dare. Most people wanted his money, his name. But Lila? She just wanted to leave. It made him smile, made him curious, made him remember a rainy night years ago, a girl with a scarf who'd saved him. Was it her? He didn't know, but he'd find out. Lila's world was quieter than the festival's glow. She poured her heart into Starlight events, a job that barely paid but let her dream. Tiana, 17 and sharp as a tack, was her light, a whirlwind of wit and creativity. Life hadn't been kind. Quentin's betrayal had left scars, a quiet ache Lila buried beneath her warm smile and busy days. Love felt like a book she'd closed, but tonight, under Seacrest's lights, a page had turned, and she wasn't sure she could close it again. As the festival wound down, Lila stood by the shore, arms crossed, trying to focus on Tiana. But her mind drifted to Evan Marshall, his teasing smirk, the way his hands had felt like home. She shook her head, muttering, "Get a grip, Lila. He's a stranger, not your story." Still, her heart raced, and for the first time in years, she wondered what it might feel like to let herself fall. "Hey, what did you think of Lila and Evan's electric first night? Will Lila run from this spark, or will she chase it? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you predict for their story. Let's keep this journey going together." The Coral District was Seacrest's beating heart, a maze of murals and galleries where the air smelled of fresh paint and roasted coffee. Starlight Events Pop-Up Gallery was a cozy haven amid the bustle, its walls lined with vibrant paintings, blues that hummed like jazz, reds that burned like the city's neon nights. Lila Brooks moved through the space with purpose, arranging a display of local art for an upcoming showcase. Her high-waisted jeans and flowy blouse were practical but stylish, her curls pulled into a loose bun that let a few strands frame her face. At 30, she was used to fading into the background at work, her ideas buried under her boss's dismissals. But today, her mind was elsewhere, replaying a night she couldn't shake, Evan Marshall. His touch, the way she'd left him at dawn. It had been 4 days since the Coral Nights Festival. 4 days since she'd stumbled into his hotel lounge. 4 days since their bodies had tangled in a moment that felt like a dream. Lila's cheeks warmed at the memory, and she scolded herself, adjusting a canvas with more force than necessary. He's a stranger, Lila. A rich one. Get it together. Her world was Starlight Grove, with its jazz clubs and tight-knit families, not the glitzy penthouses of men like Evan. She touched the empty spot on her wrist where her mother's bracelet, engraved with hope, should have been. A pang of loss hitting her. She'd left it behind along with her senses in that room. The gallery's bell chimed, and Lila glanced up, expecting a delivery guy. Instead, there was Evan Marshall, standing in her doorway like he'd walked off a billboard. He wore a navy button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and held her silver bracelet in one hand, its delicate chain catching the light. His green eyes sparkled with that same mischief from the festival, and a bouquet of sunflowers, bright as the Seacrest shore, dangled from his other hand. Lila's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. Evan? Her voice was a mix of shock and suspicion. What are you doing here? He grinned, stepping inside, his sneakers soft on the hardwood. Found something you lost, he said, holding up the bracelet. And I heard this place has the best art in town. Thought I'd check it out. He offered the flowers, a peace offering, his gaze steady but warm. Lila set her mug down, crossing her arms, her bracelets jangling, new ones, not her mother's. You're into art now? She said, her tone dry but with a flicker of amusement. Evan wandered toward a painting, a portrait of a black woman with eyes that held stories, and tilted his head like he was studying it. I'm into a lot of things, he said, turning to face her, his voice low, especially things that stick with you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Lila's pulse quickened, and she busied herself straightening a frame to avoid his eyes. Stick with you. He was smooth, too smooth, and at 30, she'd heard every line. But there was a sincerity in his voice that caught her off guard, stirring a warmth she hadn't felt since that night. You don't quit, do you? She said, half smiling despite herself. She took the bracelet, her fingers brushing his, and a spark shot through her. She set the flowers in a vase on the counter, their petals bright against the gallery's muted tones. Evan leaned against a display, close enough that she could smell his cologne, clean, with a hint of citrus. Not when it's worth it, he said, his tone soft, like he was sharing a secret. Lila shook her head, laughing quietly. Your trouble, Evan Marshall. She moved to the other side of the counter, putting space between them. This was her gallery, her rules, and she wasn't about to let a man, CEO or not, throw her off. But Evan didn't seem fazed. He strolled through the space, pausing at each painting, asking questions that felt more about her than the art. Who chose these colors? He'd say, or what's the story behind this one? She answered, keeping it professional, but his easy laugh and sharp wit chipped away at her guard. So, he said, stopping in front of an abstract canvas that glowed with golden hues, there's this art warehouse just outside Seacrest, old place, full of hidden gems. I'm going tomorrow. Come with me. He turned, his eyes locking onto hers, and Lila blinked, caught off guard. Me? Why? Her voice was genuinely confused, and she tucked a curl behind her ear, a nervous habit. Evan's expression softened, the swagger fading into something real. Because you're different, Lila. You didn't care about my name or my money that night. You were just... you. I want to know more. His honesty hit her like a wave, cracking the wall she'd built around her heart. She studied him, the boyish curl of his hair, the sincerity in his eyes, and felt a spark, brighter than she wanted to admit. But doubt crept in, cold and familiar. Evan, I'm 30. I've got a sister, a life. That night, she trailed off, her cheeks warming. It wasn't real. Maybe it wasn't yet, he said, stepping closer, his voice low. But it could be. Lila's breath caught. He was close enough that she could see the faint freckles across his nose, the way his shirt stretched over his shoulders. For a moment, she imagined saying yes, letting herself fall into whatever this was. Then reality snapped back. Tiana, her job, the world that judged her for being a black woman daring to dream. She stepped away, smoothing her blouse. I don't know, she said, softer now. I've got responsibilities. Evan nodded, like he'd expected it. Fair enough. But if you change your mind, I'll be at the warehouse. Noon tomorrow. He flashed a smile, then headed for the door, leaving her standing there, heart pounding. Alone, Lila leaned against the counter, staring at the bracelet now back on her wrist. You're different. His words echoed, and she thought of Tiana, who'd probably cheer her on, and Quentin, who'd laugh at the idea of her with someone like Evan. The thought stung, but it also stirred something stubborn in her. She wasn't sure what she'd do. But as she locked up the gallery, the idea of that warehouse didn't sound so crazy. The next morning, Lila was knee-deep in event proposals when her best friend, Simone Carter, breezed into the gallery, her locks swinging and a takeout coffee in hand. Simone was 32, a journalist with a sharp tongue and a heart of gold, and she'd been Lila's rock since their days at Seacrest Community College. Girl, you look like you're carrying the world, Simone said, setting the coffee on the counter. What's up? And don't tell me it's just paperwork. Lila sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. It's nothing, just a weird week. She hesitated, then spilled the story. The festival, the lounge, Evan, the night that still made her blush. Simone's eyes widened, and she let out a low whistle. Hold up, you hooked up with some hotel guy? Lila, you wild. It was a mistake, Lila said quickly, her cheeks heating. I was flustered, he was there. It didn't mean anything. Simone raised an eyebrow, sipping her coffee. Uh-huh. And that's why you're glowing like you just won the lottery? Come on, Lila. You haven't had a spark like this since Quentin, and we both know how that ended. Lila's smile faded at the mention of her ex. Quentin Hayes had been her everything, until he walked away, citing family expectations over their interracial relationship. The betrayal had left scars, ones she hid beneath her warm smile and busy days. Exactly, she said, her voice tight. Which is why I'm not doing this. Evans, he's from another world. It's a recipe for disaster. Simone softened, reaching for her hand. Maybe. But you deserve to feel something, Lila. Even if it's just fun. You're not just Tiana's sister or this gallery's grunt. You're a woman. A fine one, at that. She winked and Lila laughed, the tension easing. Fine or not, I'm not chasing some mystery man, Lila said. But her mind wandered to Evan's flowers, still bright on the counter. Simone didn't push, just gave her a knowing look before heading out, leaving Lila with her thoughts and a decision she wasn't ready to make. That evening, Lila found herself in Evan's car, a sleek black SUV parked outside a quiet Seacrest cafe. She'd texted him, half expecting he'd ignore her, but he'd shown up, waiting with 2 iced coffees and that damn smirk. The cafe was a cozy spot, with brick walls and the smell of fresh pastries, the kind of place where locals lingered over laptops and gossip. Evan looked out of place in his fitted jacket, trying to blend in, but his energy was too bright, like a spotlight in a dim room. Thanks for coming, he said, as she slid into the passenger seat, sliding a coffee toward her. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I, Lila admitted, wrapping her hands around the cold cup. But I figured I owed you for the bracelet, and I was curious. Curious is good, Evan said, leaning back, his eyes never leaving her. So what's your deal, Lila? Event planner, sister, what else? She hesitated, then opened up, just a little, about Starlight events, her love for art that told untold stories, her roots in Starlight Grove, where jazz spilled from every corner. Evan listened, really listened, his gaze steady. He shared, too, about growing up in a world of privilege, losing his sister young, the loneliness of running hotels no one knew he owned. Everyone wants something from me, he said, his voice quieter. But you? You didn't even want my name. Lila smiled, stirring her coffee. Maybe I just didn't want to be another fling. They laughed, the sound easy, and for a moment, the car felt like their own little world. As they drove toward the warehouse, the city lights blurring past, Evan reached for her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Lila, he said, pulling over under a street lamp, I can't stop thinking about you. Before she could respond, he leaned in, kissing her with a hunger that stole her breath. It was deep, desperate, his hand sliding to her waist, her fingers tangling in his hair. The world faded, just them and the hum of the engine. But as they pulled apart, a flash caught Lila's eye, a camera lens glinting from across the street. Her stomach twisted. Evan, she whispered, grabbing his arm. Someone's watching. He glanced over, his jaw tightening, but he kept his voice calm. Ignore it. Happens sometimes. But it didn't. Not to Lila. By morning, the internet was buzzing with grainy photos of their kiss, headlines screaming, Mystery Woman Snags Seacrest Exec. The comments were worse, calling her a gold digger, mocking her as a black woman daring to step into Evan's world. Lila scrolled through her phone in the gallery, her coffee going cold, her hand shaking. This is why I don't do this. Evan called that night, his voice steady despite the chaos. Lila, I'm sorry. I should have been more careful. Let me fix this. He was pacing his penthouse, the city glittering below, but all he could think about was her. Lila curled on her couch, Tiana asleep upstairs, and sighed. It's not your fault, Evan. It's just, this is my life. Tiana's getting dragged into it. She hung up, her chest tight, feeling the weight of their worlds colliding. Back at the gallery, Lila stared at a painting of a stormy sea, its waves crashing like her thoughts. She told herself it was nothing, just a fleeting spark. But Evan's voice lingered low and inviting, and as she locked up for the night, she wondered if she was running from him or from herself. The moonlit shore stretched out like a silver ribbon under the sea-crest sky, its waves whispering secrets against the sand. Lila Brooks stood on the balcony of Evan Marshall's penthouse at the Sapphire Wave Hotel, her fingers wrapped around a glass of iced tea, the condensation cool against her skin. The penthouse was a world apart from her Starlight Grove apartment, all glass and chrome, with a view that swept across the ocean, its surface glittering like 1,000 stars. Inside, candles flickered on a sleek dining table, and the soft hum of a jazz record, Miles Davis, she noted, drifted from a hidden speaker. Lila's sundress, a deep burgundy that clung to her curves, swayed in the breeze, her curls loose and catching the twilight. She should have felt like she was floating. Instead, she felt like she was sinking, caught in a tide she couldn't control. Evan stepped onto the balcony, his bare feet silent on the polished wood, a quiet smile on his lips. He wore a fitted black t-shirt and jeans, his hair still damp from a swim earlier, and the sight of him, casual, unguarded, made her heart do that annoying flip it always did. You're quiet tonight, he said, leaning against the railing beside her, his voice low and warm, like he could coax her thoughts out if he tried hard enough. Lila glanced at him, her bracelet, her mother's, engraved with hope, glinting under the lights. His green eyes held hers, and for a moment, the world was just them. The ocean's hum, the candles glow, the way his shoulder brushed hers. "Just thinking," she said, sipping her tea to hide the tremor in her voice. Thinking about Tiana, who was at a friend's house but had been moody lately, her usual spark dimmed. Thinking about the headlines that wouldn't quit, Seacrest exec's mystery woman, and the comments that cut deeper, calling her a gold digger or mocking her as a black woman stepping into a world that didn't want her. Thinking about how she'd let herself fall for Evan Marshall, a man whose life was a spotlight she wasn't ready for. This was their 4th secret date in 10 days, stolen moments away from the paparazzi and her boss's prying eyes. But each one felt heavier, like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Evan reached for her hand, his fingers lacing through hers, warm and steady. "Talk to me, Lila. What's going on in that head of yours?" His thumb brushed her knuckles, a small gesture that sent a shiver down her spine. She wanted to pull away, to keep her walls up, but his touch was an anchor, and she was tired of drifting. "It's all this," she said, gesturing at the penthouse, the view, the life he led. "Your world, Evan. It's not mine. Tiana's getting hurt because of it." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking back the sting in her eyes. Tiana had come home from school yesterday, slamming her bedroom door, muttering about kids showing her their phones with Evan's face, asking if her sister was really dating him. Lila had tried to talk, but Tiana had just shrugged, her silence louder than words. The guilt was a weight Lila couldn't shake. Evan's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed soft. "I'm sorry, Lila. I should have been more careful. But I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to." He stepped closer, his hand sliding to her waist, and she felt the heat of him through her dress. Her breath hitched, and she hated how easily he unraveled her. "You don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They look at me like I don't belong, like I'm some mistake." "You're not a mistake," Evan said, his tone fierce now. "You're everything, Lila, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." He pulled her gently, turning her to face him, and before she could protest, his lips were on hers, soft at first, then deeper, a kiss that tasted of promises and salt air. Lila melted into it, her hands finding his chest, the steady thump of his heart under her palms. The world faded. Just them, the ocean, and a hunger she hadn't let herself feel in years. They moved inside, the candles casting long shadows on the walls, and Evan led her to a plush rug by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sea shimmering beyond. The jazz record spun, its notes weaving through the air, and he kissed her again, slower, his hands tracing the curve of her hips, reverent, like she was a work of art he was afraid to break. Lila's fingers tangled in his hair, and for a moment she let herself forget. The headlines, Tiana's hurt, the world that judged her. "Evan," she murmured against his lips, a question, a plea. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes dark with want, but soft, with something deeper. "Tell me to stop, and I will," he said, his voice rough. But she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she pulled him closer, and they sank to the rug, the ocean's rhythm echoing their own. His hands moved over her, gentle but sure, peeling away her dress to reveal skin that glowed in the candlelight. Lila felt exposed. Every scar and stretch mark a story she'd hidden. Motherhood, survival, loss. But Evan's touch was a balm, his lips brushing her collarbone, whispering, "You're beautiful, Lila. Every damn inch of you." Their lovemaking was a dance of heat and trust, each touch a vow, each sigh a confession. Her breath came in soft gasps, her hands clutching his shoulders as they moved together, the world outside forgotten. In that moment she wasn't a sister or a planner or a woman judged by strangers. She was just Lila, alive and wanted. When it was over, they lay tangled in each other, the rug soft beneath them, the jazz record spinning to silence. Evan's arm draped over her waist, his breath warm against her neck. "Stay with me," he whispered, not just for the night, but for something more. Lila turned to face him, her curls spilling across his chest. The candles had burned low, casting a golden glow over his features. She wanted to say yes, to believe in this, but reality was creeping back. "Evan," she said, her voice steady but heavy. "This, us, it's not that simple." She sat up, pulling her dress back on, the fabric cool against her skin. "My ex, Quentin, he broke me. Left me because his family couldn't handle a black girlfriend. I rebuilt everything for Tiana, for me. I can't let it fall apart again." Evan sat up, his eyes searching hers. "I'm not him, Lila. I know it's messy, but I'm here. For you, for Tiana, for whatever this becomes." He reached for her hand, but she stood, wrapping her arms around herself. "I need time," she said, her voice breaking. "This is moving too fast, and Tiana's hurting. I can't do this to her." Evan nodded, his face crumpling, but his voice steady. "Okay, if that's what you need, I'll wait." He stood, pulling on his shirt, and walked her to the elevator, the silence between them heavy. Lila drove home under a starless sky, her heart a tangle of longing and fear. She told herself it was the right choice, but the memory of Evan's touch lingered, warm and insistent, like a melody she couldn't stop humming. The next morning, Lila was back at the Starlight Events Gallery, trying to lose herself in work. The space was quiet, just the hum of the air conditioner and the soft clink of her bracelets as she hung a new painting, a vibrant abstract that reminded her of Starlight Grove sunsets. Tiana was at school, but her silence at breakfast had been deafening, a wall Lila didn't know how to climb. Her phone buzzed with a text from Simone Carter, her best friend. "You okay? Saw the latest headlines. Call me." Lila ignored it, not ready to face the world's judgment. But when the gallery door chimed, she looked up, expecting Simone. Instead, it was Quentin Hayes, her ex, all smug charm in a tailored blazer, his eyes cold as ever. "Lila," he said, leaning against the counter like he owned the place. "Heard about your new guy. Really? Some hotel hotshot?" His laugh was sharp, cutting through her like it always had. Lila's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice even. "It's not your business, Quentin. What do you want?" He smirked, adjusting his cufflinks. "Just checking on you. And Tiana. You're embarrassing yourself, you know, dragging her through this circus." The words hit every doubt she'd buried, and she pointed to the door, her voice firm. "Get out." Quentin raised his hands, mock surrender, but his parting shot lingered. "You'll crash and burn, Lila. You always do." Alone, Lila sank into a chair, her hands shaking. She thought of Tiana's hurt, the headlines, the whispers from her co-worker, Marissa Tate, who'd smirked yesterday, saying, "Guess you're Evan's favorite now." Then she thought of Evan's arms around her, the way he'd looked at her like she was enough. It was too much, too heavy. She grabbed her phone and typed a message to Evan. "I need space. I'm sorry." She hit send before she could change her mind, then turned off her phone, the gallery's silence swallowing her. Across town, Evan sat in his penthouse office, staring at Lila's text, his fingers hovering over the keys. His assistant was rattling off gala plans, but he barely heard her. Lila's words were a punch to the gut, and he thought of that rainy night years ago, the girl with the scarf who'd given him hope. He was sure it was her now, the bracelet a clue he couldn't ignore. He wanted to call, to fight for her, but she'd asked for space, and he'd give it even if it hurt. He picked up a pen and started sketching, a habit he'd abandoned years ago, trying to capture the curve of her smile. Lila drove to pick up Tiana from school, her heart heavy. Tiana climbed into the car, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her braids swinging. "You okay, sis?" Lila asked, her voice tight. Tiana nodded, but her eyes said otherwise, and the drive home was silent. Seacrest's lights blurring past. Lila felt the weight of her choices, the pull of Tiana's needs against the spark she'd felt with Evan. She told herself it was over, just a fleeting dream. But as she parked, Tiana's voice broke the quiet. "You're sad. Is it him?" Lila's throat tightened, and she forced a smile. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." But Tiana's gaze held hers, sharp and knowing, and Lila wondered how long she could keep running from the truth. In her gallery, among paintings that spoke of resilience, she felt like a fraud, strong on the outside, breaking within. And somewhere, in a penthouse overlooking the sea, Evan sketched on, his lines a lifeline to a woman he wasn't ready to let go. The Coral District buzzed with life, its galleries and cafes spilling light onto the cobblestone streets. The Starlight Events Showcase was a jewel in the chaos, a vibrant space where paintings and photographs told stories of Seacrest's soul, portraits of elders with eyes full of wisdom, abstracts that pulsed like jazz, street scenes that hummed with the city's heartbeat. Lila Brooks moved through the crowd, her navy dress elegant but easy, its fabric catching the soft glow of string lights. Her curls were swept into a high bun, a few strands framing her face, and her smile was warm as she greeted guests, artists, collectors, locals from Starlight Grove who'd become family. At 30, she was in her element, a conductor of this symphony of color and connection. But beneath her poised exterior, a quiet ache lingered, a melody named Evan Marshall. It had been 2 weeks since she'd texted him asking for space, 2 weeks of throwing herself into work, driving Tiana to school, pretending her heart wasn't bruised. The headlines had faded, but the comments still stung. Gold digger. Not his type. Words that echoed the doubts she'd carried since Quentin's betrayal. Tiana was talking to her again, her spark slowly returning, but Lila felt like she was walking a tightrope, balancing her sister's needs against the pull of a man she couldn't forget. Tonight, though, was about the art, about the community she'd nurtured. She wouldn't let her personal chaos dim this moment. Tiana, 17 and radiant in a yellow sundress, flitted through the gallery, her braids swinging as she handed out programs. "Sis, this is amazing," she said, nudging Lila with a grin. Lila laughed, ruffling her sister's hair. "Thanks, T. Couldn't do it without you." Tiana rolled her eyes but stayed close, her presence a reminder of why Lila had pushed Evan away. She couldn't risk Tiana's happiness, not for a man whose world was a spotlight she didn't belong in. The showcase was in full swing, the air filled with chatter, clinking glasses, and the wail of a trumpet from a live quartet in the corner. Lila was chatting with a collector, a warm, older woman who loved Tiana's street photography, when Tiana tugged at her arm. "Lila, you've got a delivery," she whispered, her eyes bright with a secret Lila couldn't read. "Back room. Go check it out." Lila frowned, excusing herself from the collector. "A delivery? Now?" Tiana just shrugged, her grin suspiciously wide, and Lila made her way to the back, her heels clicking on the hard wood. The storage room was dim, lit by a single bulb, crates and canvases stacked against the walls. On a table in the center sat a wrapped canvas, no note. Lila's heart skipped as she peeled back the paper, revealing a burst of color, reds and golds swirling like a Seacrest sunset, with flecks of teal that mirrored her favorite dress. It was raw, stunning, like the artist had poured their heart onto the canvas. Tucked into the frame was a slip of paper, scrawled in bold handwriting, "For Lila, you're my light." E. Her breath caught. Evan. She traced the painting, tears pricking her eyes. He'd remembered a conversation at the cafe, when she'd mentioned loving abstracts that felt like music. This wasn't just a gift. It was a piece of him, a gesture that saw her not as a sister or a planner, but as a woman with dreams. Her fingers trembled as she set the canvas down, her mind a tangle of fear and hope. He's still here. After everything. She didn't hear the door open, but she felt him, a shift in the air, a warmth that made her turn. Evan stood in the doorway, dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, no trace of his CEO polish. His green eyes were soft, hesitant, like he was afraid she'd send him away. "Hey, Lila," he said, his voice low. "Hope it's okay I'm here." Lila's throat tightened, and she clutched the canvas like a shield. "Evan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You did this?" She held up the painting and he nodded, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit she hadn't noticed before. "Yeah, I'm no artist, but I wanted you to have something real, from me." He stepped closer, stopping just short of her space. "I heard about your showcase. Couldn't miss it. This place, what you've built, it's incredible." Lila laughed, a nervous sound, tucking a curl behind her ear. "Thanks. I didn't expect." She trailed off, gesturing at the canvas, at him. "Why are you doing this, Evan, after I pushed you away?" His expression softened, and he took a step closer, his voice steady but raw. "Because I can't stop thinking about you, Lila. I tried. Gave you space like you asked. But every room I'm in, every plan I make, it's you I see." His words cracked something open in her, and she felt the walls she'd built crumbling. She wanted to run, to hide, but her feet stayed rooted, drawn to the sincerity in his eyes. "Evan, this is crazy," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm a black woman with a kid sister to raise. Your world, it chews up people like me." She thought of the headlines, Tiana's hurt, Quentin's cruel words. But Evan didn't flinch. He closed the distance, his hand brushing her arm, warm and grounding. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm not my world. I'm just a guy who's falling for you, and I'll fight for this, if you'll let me." His thumb grazed her wrist, and Lila's breath hitched. The room felt too small, the air charged with possibility. She looked at the canvas, then at him, and something shifted, a spark of courage she hadn't known she had. "Okay," she whispered, stepping closer. "One more chance?" Evan's face lit up, and before she could second-guess herself, she was in his arms, their lips meeting in a kiss that was all fire and relief. It was deep, desperate, tears mixing with laughter as they held each other, the canvas forgotten on the table. The crowd outside cheered for the quartet, oblivious, but Tiana, peeking through the door, gave a quiet thumbs up, her grin wide. They pulled back, still holding hands, and Lila laughed, wiping her eyes. "You're gonna be the death of me, Evan Marshall." He grinned, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Worth it," he said, and she believed him, just for now. The moment was shattered by a text from Simone Carter, Lila's best friend. "Trouble at the front. Quentin's here." Lila's stomach dropped. She showed Evan the message, her joy replaced by dread. "My ex," she said, her voice tight. "He's been sniffing around, trying to mess with me." Evan's jaw clenched, but he squeezed her hand. "Let's handle it. Together." They walked back to the showcase, the crowd's hum a distant roar. Quentin Hayes stood near the entrance, his blazer crisp, his smile all teeth. He was chatting with a guest, but his eyes locked onto Lila, cold and calculating. Tiana hovered nearby, her face tense, and Simone was at her side, arms crossed, ready to throw punches if needed. Lila straightened, her hand still in Evan's, and approached, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Quentin," she said, stopping a few feet away. "What do you want?" He smirked, adjusting his tie. "Just supporting the arts, Lila. And checking on Tiana. Heard you've been busy with your fling." His gaze flicked to Evan, dismissive, and Lila felt Evan tense beside her. The crowd was starting to notice, whispers rippling, and Lila's cheeks burned. But she didn't back down. "This isn't about Tiana," she said, her voice like steel. "You lost the right to check on her when you walked out. So say what you came to say and leave." Quentin's smirk faltered, but he leaned in, his voice low. "You're making a fool of yourself, Lila." "With him? You think he's serious? You'll crash like always." The words were a knife, but before Lila could respond, Simone stepped forward, her locks swinging, her eyes blazing. "Back off, Quentin," Simone said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Lila's built more than you ever will. Take your sorry self out of here." The guests murmured, some nodding, and Tiana moved closer to Lila, her hand brushing her sister's arm. Evan stayed silent, his presence a quiet strength, letting Lila lead. Quentin's face reddened, but he knew he was outnumbered. "Fine," he spat, turning to leave. "But this isn't over." He pushed through the crowd, and Lila exhaled, her knees weak. Evan's arm slid around her waist, steadying her, and Tiana hugged her, whispering, "You're badass, sis." Lila laughed, the sound shaky but real, and Simone grinned, giving Evan a grudging nod. "Not half bad, hotel guy." The showcase continued, the tension easing, but Lila's mind was racing. As she mingled, thanking guests, she felt Evan's eyes on her, a promise in his gaze, but Simone pulled her aside later, her voice serious. "Lila, I dug into Marissa Tate. She's been talking to some sketchy reporter, and I think she's got something. Maybe a video of you and Evan, from the cafe or worse." Lila's blood ran cold. A video. Her privacy, Tiana's safety, her job, all at risk. She looked across the room at Evan, laughing with Tiana over a painting, and her heart twisted. "What do I do, Simone?" she whispered. "You fight," Simone said, gripping her shoulders. "You're Lila Brooks. You don't break." Lila nodded, but fear gnawed at her. She rejoined Evan, forcing a smile, and he sensed her unease. "You okay?" he asked, his hand brushing her back. "For now," she said, leaning into him. "But we need to talk. Tomorrow." He nodded, his eyes searching hers, and they stayed close as the night wound down, the showcase a success, but the threat of Marissa looming like a storm cloud. Back at her apartment, Lila sat on her couch, the moonlight spilling through the window. Tiana was asleep, and the quiet was heavy. She stared at Evan's canvas, now propped on her coffee table, its colors a reminder of his faith in her. Simone's warning echoed, and Lila knew she couldn't hide. She texted Evan, "We need to meet. Marissa's planning something. I'm not letting her win." Her finger hovered over the send button, then pressed it, her resolve hardening. She was done running. Marissa wanted a fight. She'd get one. But as she curled up, her bracelet warm against her skin, she knew the real battle was within, trusting her heart, believing she deserved this love. The air at Crestview Retreat was sharp with pine and the distant rush of a waterfall, a quiet escape from Seacrest's neon glow. Lila Brooks stood by the edge of a turquoise pool, her linen cover-up loose over her swimsuit, the fabric fluttering in the evening breeze. String lights twinkled above the wooden deck, casting a warm glow over clusters of young hotel staff laughing and sipping cocktails, their voices mingling with the thump of R&B from a portable speaker. Lila's fingers tightened around her sparkling water, her curls pulled into a high ponytail that swayed as she shifted her weight. At 30, She felt every glance from the 20-somethings in their sleek bikinis, their ease a reminder of a world she didn't belong to. Her mother's bracelet, engraved with hope, glinted on her wrist, but it couldn't quiet the unease twisting in her gut. Evan Marshall lounged on a deck chair nearby, a baseball cap pulled low to blend in, a beer dangling from his hand. He was trying to keep things low-key, but his presence drew eyes like a magnet. Whispers from staff, giggles from a group of young women tossing their hair by the pool. Lila felt their stares, their murmurs, and her stomach knotted. She'd agreed to this weekend getaway to escape the chaos of Seacrest. The paparazzi, Marissa Tate's schemes, the weight of her choices. But Crestview felt like another stage, one where she was miscast. Evan had promised a quiet retreat, just them, but the reality was louder, messier. "You okay?" Evan asked, his voice low as he stood, moving to her side. His fingers brushed hers, warm and grounding, but Lila pulled away, forcing a smile. "Fine," she said, adjusting her cover-up. "Just not used to this." She gestured vaguely at the pool, the party, the world that seemed to orbit him. Evan frowned, setting his beer down on a nearby table. "Lila, talk to me. You've been off all day." She wanted to, but the words stuck in her throat. The past week had been a whirlwind. Evan's painting at the showcase, their kiss in the storage room, the confrontation with Quentin. Simone's warning about a possible video haunted her, and Tiana's tentative acceptance of Evan felt fragile, like a thread that could snap. Lila had let herself hope, let herself fall, but now, surrounded by Evan's world, she felt every one of her 30 years. "It's nothing," she said, but her voice was tight, and Evan's eyes narrowed, sensing the lie. Before he could press, a young staffer approached, her blonde hair pulled into a high bun, her smile bold. "Mr. Marshall, I'm such a huge fan of your hotels," she gushed, her hand grazing his arm. "Can I get a quick selfie?" Evan hesitated, glancing at Lila, but she nodded, her face neutral. "Go ahead," she said, sipping her drink, the fizz sharp against her tongue. The staffer leaned in close, snapping the photo, and Lila's chest tightened. She looked away, focusing on the pool's ripples, but the woman's voice carried. "I loved that charity event you hosted last year. You danced with that model, right? So romantic." Lila froze, her glass trembling in her hand. Danced with a model. The words hit like a slap, dragging up the memory of their night at the festival, when Evan's touch had felt like a promise. She'd thought it was hers, something real. She turned, her eyes locking onto Evan's. His face shifted, caught off guard, and he quickly stepped away from the staffer. "That was a while ago," he said, his voice clipped. "Thanks for the support." The woman pouted but wandered off, leaving a silence that felt like a chasm. Lila set her glass down, her hands shaking. "A model?" she said, her voice low but sharp. "You danced with someone else at an event like that?" Evan's eyes widened, and he reached for her, but she stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "Lila, it was nothing," he said, his voice urgent. "A PR thing before I met you. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" she snapped, her voice rising. Heads turned, but she didn't care. "You let me think what we had was special, Evan. You made me feel—" She stopped, her throat tightening, tears burning her eyes. She thought of Quentin's lies, the way he'd made her feel small, unworthy. "I thought it was real." "It is real," Evan said, stepping closer, his voice pleading. "With you, it's everything. That other time was just a show. You're not her, Lila. You're—" "Stop!" She cut him off, her voice breaking. "I can't do this, Evan. I can't keep wondering if I'm just another story in your world." She turned, her cover-up fluttering as she walked toward their cabin, the mountain air cold against her skin. Evan followed, his voice desperate. "Lila, please, let me explain." Inside the cabin, a fire crackled in the hearth, but the warmth did nothing to ease the chill between them. Lila stood by the window staring at the dark hills, her arms crossed. Evan paced, running a hand through his hair. "I should have told you," he said, his voice raw. "It was a dumb move, a company event. I didn't know you then. I didn't know what real felt like." Lila turned, her eyes flashing. "You don't get it, Evan. I've been lied to before. Quentin, he broke me, made me feel like I wasn't enough. And now, I'm dragging Tiana through this mess, letting the world tear me apart for what? To be your muse until you find someone younger, shinier?" Her voice cracked, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm not her, Evan. I'm not them." She gestured toward the pool, the staff, the life he led. Evan's face crumpled and he stopped pacing, his hands falling to his sides. "You're not them," he said, his voice low. "You're Lila. You're the only one I see." He took a step closer, but she shook her head, stepping back. "I need to be alone," she said, her voice barely audible. "I can't do this right now. Tiana's hurting, and I'm breaking." Evan nodded, his eyes glistening. "Okay," he whispered, "if that's what you need." He grabbed his jacket and left, the door closing softly behind him. Lila sank onto the couch, her sobs muffled by the crackling fire. She felt like she was drowning, caught between the love she wanted and the fear she couldn't shake. Outside, Evan drove down the mountain, his knuckles white on the wheel, the ache in his chest, a song he didn't know how to write. Back in Seacrest, Leela threw herself into routine, driving Tiana to school, arranging gallery displays, smiling for clients. But her heart was a ghost, haunting her with Evan's voice, their night together now a painful echo. Tiana noticed, her sharp eyes catching Lila's silences. "Sis, you're not you," she said one evening over takeout jerk chicken, her voice soft but firm. Lila forced a smile, picking at her rice. "I'm fine, T, just busy." Tiana wasn't buying it. "It's Evan, isn't it? You miss him." The question landed like a stone, and Lila's throat tightened. She wanted to brush it off, but Tiana's gaze held her. "It's complicated," she admitted, crumpling her napkin. "I had to think about you." Tiana reached for her hand, surprising Lila with her steadiness. "Lila, I'm okay. Those kids at school, they're dumb. I just want you happy." Lila's eyes welled up, and she pulled Tiana into a hug, laughing through tears. "When did you get so wise?" she asked, and Tiana shrugged, smirking. "I'm your sister." That night, Lila lay awake, Tiana's words echoing. Happiness felt like a risk, but maybe one worth taking. She started sketching again, something she hadn't done since college, her pencil tracing faces and moments that spilled from her heart. One sketch, hidden in her drawer, was Evan's profile, his jawline sharp, his eyes soft. She didn't show it to anyone, but keeping it felt like a promise, not to him, but to herself. Meanwhile, Evan was unraveling. He'd poured his pain into a new song, Hope's Canvas, its lyrics a love letter to Lila, her strength, her beauty, the way she'd changed him. His assistant, Marcus Lee, noticed the shift, ribbing him gently. "You're moping, boss," he said over coffee at a Seacrest diner. Evan half smiled, stirring his drink. "Just thinking," he said. But it was more than that. He was lost without her. Desperate to reach her, Evan booked a last-minute gig at the Salty Note, a dive bar in the Coral District. It wasn't a corporate event. Just a stage with peeling paint and a crowd of locals, but it felt right. He texted Tiana, hoping she'd convince Lila to come. Tiana, sensing her sister's ache, took the bait. "Lila, there's a show tonight," she said, casual but insistent. "Just us. It'll be fun." Lila hesitated, her sketch of Evan burning a hole in her mind, and agreed, if only to see Tiana smile. The salty note was packed, the air thick with sweat and whiskey. Lila and Tiana squeezed into a corner, the dim lights casting shadows on the walls. When Evan took the stage, guitar in hand, Lila's breath caught. He looked different, older somehow, his eyes carrying a weight she hadn't seen before. "This is new," he said into the mic, his voice rough. "For someone who changed everything. It's called Hope's Canvas." The first notes were soft, haunting, and then his voice filled the room, raw and aching. "You're the colors I can't name, the fire in my veins. Through the storm, you're my frame, my hope's canvas, my flame." Each word was a brushstroke, painting Lila's strength, her grace, her heart. The crowd was silent, captivated. But Lila was frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. Tiana squeezed her hand, whispering, "He means it, sis." When the song ended, the bar erupted, but Evan's eyes found Lila's, a question in his gaze. She stood, her heart pounding, and pushed through the crowd, Tiana's nod urging her on. Evan met her at the edge of the stage, his guitar still slung over his shoulder. "Lila," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I should have been honest. She cut him off, stepping into his arms, her tears soaking his shirt. "I'm scared, Evan," she whispered, "but I'm here." He held her tight, the crowd fading, and for a moment, it was just them, two hearts finding their way back. Tiana clapped from the corner, her grin wide, and Marcus, watching from the bar, raised his glass, a rare smile on his face. Lila and Evan left the bar hand in hand, the night air cool against their skin. They didn't have all the answers. Marissa's threat still loomed and Tiana's world was still fragile, but they had this moment, this promise. Lila leaned against Evan, his arm around her, and felt a flicker of hope. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady. "About everything." "Tomorrow," he said, kissing her forehead. "Tonight, let's just be." She nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. But as they walked back to Seacrest, Lila knew the storm wasn't over. Marissa was out there, and the world was watching. She'd chosen Evan, chosen love, but the fight was just beginning. The moonlit shore shimmered under a twilight sky, its sand glowing silver as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in corals and golds. The Sapphire Wave Hotel's grand gala was a spectacle, its open-air pavilion alive with the hum of Seacrest's elite, investors in tailored suits, artists in vibrant prints, locals from Starlight Grove mingling with wide-eyed wonder. Chandeliers cast golden light over tables draped in navy silk, and star-shaped lanterns floated above, a nod to Lila Brooks's vision. She stood near the stage, her emerald gown hugging her frame, her curls loose and cascading over her shoulders. Her silver bracelet engraved with hope caught the light, a quiet reminder of her mother's strength. At 33, Lila was a force, a woman who'd built a name for herself, her gallery thriving, her sister blooming, her heart open but scarred. Tonight wasn't just a gala. It was a reckoning. 3 years had passed since she'd last seen Evan Marshall, 3 years since their tearful embrace at the Salty Note, where his song, Hope's Canvas, had pulled her back from the edge. 3 years of growing, healing, and wondering. Lila had poured herself into Starlight events, expanding it with a new space for young artists, many from Starlight Grove, their voices loud and unapologetic. She'd taken up painting again, her canvases bold and vibrant, lining her office walls, cityscapes, faces, stories of resilience. Tiana, now 20, was a junior at Seacrest Art Institute, her wit sharper than ever, her bond with Lila unbreakable. Life was fuller than Lila had dared hope. But Evan's absence was a quiet ache, a note she couldn't unhear. She'd caught his music on the radio, softer now, less polished. He'd left Marshall Resorts, trading corporate life for a solo career. His songs raw and honest, played in small venues rather than stadiums. The tabloids had moved on, and so, she assumed, had he. Maybe he'd found someone new, someone who fit his world. The thought stung, but she wished him well, or tried to. Tonight, though, Starlight Events was hosting the gala, a fundraiser for local youth programs. Lila had planned every detail, from the jerk chicken skewers to the jazz quartet, but she hadn't expected the headliner, not until Tiana, with a mischievous grin, had let it slip that morning. "Sis, Evan's performing. Don't lose it." Now, as the crowd swayed, Lila's heart raced. She scanned the stage, where roadies adjusted mics, and felt Tiana's hand on her arm. "You got this, Lila," Tiana said, her braids pulled into a high bun, her yellow dress bright against the dusk. Lila laughed, nudging her. "I'm fine, Miss Nosy." But her eyes betrayed her, searching for a glimpse of him. The lights dimmed, and the crowd cheered as Evan stepped onto the stage, guitar in hand. No band, just him. He looked different, his hair longer, curling at the nape of his neck, his frame leaner, dressed in a simple white tee and jeans. But his green eyes were the same, bright and searching, and when they found Lila's, the world stilled. "Seacrest," he said into the mic, his voice warm. "This is home, and tonight's for someone who made it that way." The crowd roared, thinking it was a shout-out to the city, but Lila's breath caught. "Me?" He strummed the first notes of Hope's Canvas, and the song unfolded like a love letter, its lyrics sharper now, refined by time. "You're the colors I can't name, the fire in my veins. Through the storm, you're my frame, my hope's canvas, my flame." His voice was raw, each note a confession, and Lila's eyes filled with tears. The crowd swayed, but she was frozen, her hands clasped tight, Tiana's arm around her. The song wasn't just about her. It was her strength as a black woman, her courage, her heart. Evan's eyes never left hers, and when the final chord faded, the crowd erupted. But he spoke again, his voice soft. "Lila Brooks, this is for you." The crowd turned, gasps and murmurs rippling, and Lila's cheeks burned. Tiana pushed her forward, whispering, "Go, sis." Lila stumbled toward the stage, her heels sinking into the sand, and Evan met her at the edge, dropping his guitar to pull her into his arms. The crowd cheered, but it was just them, their foreheads touching, tears mixing with laughter. "You're here?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Always," he said, his hands cupping her face. "I never stopped loving you, Lila." The words cracked her open, and she kissed him, deep and unapologetic, the crowd's roar fading to a hum. It was a promise kept, a vow renewed under the Seacrest stars. Tiana clapped wildly, snapping a photo, and Simone Carter, watching from the bar, raised her wine glass with a grin. "About damn time," she muttered. They pulled back, still holding hands, and Lila laughed, wiping her eyes. "Your trouble, Evan Marshall." He grinned, brushing a curl from her face. "Worth it." The crowd was still cheering, and Evan handed her the mic, a playful dare. "Say something," he said. Lila hesitated, then stepped forward, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Thank you, Seacrest," she said, her smile wide. "This night, this music, this love, it's for all of us who keep fighting, keep creating, keep loving. Let's keep it going." The crowd roared and Evan squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with pride. Tiana rushed the stage, hugging them both, and for a moment they were a family, whole and happy. Later, in the Starlight Events office, the gala over and the crowd gone, Lila and Evan lingered, the room lit by a single lamp. Paintings leaned against the walls, and the air smelled of paint and sea salt. Lila sat on the edge of a desk, Evan standing between her knees, his hands on her hips. 3 years, she said, her voice soft. "What happened, Evan?" He sighed, his thumbs tracing circles on her sides. "I left the hotels, wrote music, tried to figure out who I was without the suits. But every song was you. I wanted to call, but you needed space, and I didn't want to hurt you again." His voice cracked, and Lila's heart ached. She touched his face, her fingers grazing his jaw. "I was scared," she admitted, her eyes glistening. "Scared of us, of failing, of everything. But I'm not anymore." She pulled him closer, their lips meeting in a kiss that was slow, searing, a fire reignited. His hands slid up her back, pulling her against him, and she felt the years melt away, each touch a reclaiming of what they'd lost. They moved to the floor, a blanket spread beneath them, and their lovemaking was a dance of memory and promise. Each kiss a vow, each sigh a homecoming. In the dim light, Lila's skin glowed, her curves a map Evan traced with reverence, and she felt beautiful, not despite her years, but because of them. After, they lay tangled, the blanket soft, the room quiet. "You're beautiful when you laugh," Evan murmured, his fingers in her curls. Lila smiled, her head on his chest. "You're not so bad yourself, rock star." They laughed, the sound filling the space, and talked until dawn, about his music, her gallery's growth, Tiana's art, the life they could build. "No rush," he said, kissing her forehead. "We've got time." Weeks later, Lila and Evan sat on a blanket at Moonlit Shore, the same spot where they'd reunited. Tiana sprawled beside them, eating ice cream, her sketchpad open. The ocean stretched endless before them, and Lila leaned against Evan, his arm around her. "So," Tiana said, licking her spoon, "is your new album all sappy love songs for Lila?" She smirked, and Evan tossed a napkin at her, grinning. "Maybe a few," he said, and Lila laughed, her heart lighter than it had been in years. They'd moved into a small house in the Coral District, a cozy place with a studio for Evan and a room for Lila's paintings. Starlight Events was busier than ever, the new space funded partly by Evan's quiet support, not his money, but his belief in her. He was there, hanging frames, charming clients with that grin she loved, and she was his biggest fan, front row at every show. Their life wasn't perfect. Lila still ran the gallery remotely when Evan toured, and Tiana's college schedule kept her busy. Quentin had faded, his threats empty, his barbs irrelevant. Marissa Tate's schemes had unraveled. Simone's evidence, a leaked email chain, had exposed her lies, and she'd left Seacrest, her reputation in tatters. The headlines had moved on, and so had they, to mornings with coffee, evenings with laughter, a future they'd write together. One evening, at a beach picnic, Evan pulled out his guitar, strumming a new song, his voice soft against the waves. "For you," he said, looking at Lila. The lyrics spoke of waiting, of home, of a love that never faded. Tiana clapped when he finished, teasing. "Okay, that was pretty good." Lila's eyes shone, her hand squeezing his. "It's perfect," she whispered. and meant it. Seacrest watched, its lights twinkling like it was in on their secret. They weren't hiding anymore, not from cameras, doubts, or the years between them. Tiana was thriving, her bond with Evan growing, a family forming in ways Lila hadn't dared dream. Their story had started with a kiss, a stumble in a city of dreamers. It had weathered storms, doubts, distance, pain, but love, the real kind, didn't quit. Lila and Evan had found it, held it, built it anew. As the sun set, casting gold across the sand, they sat close, Tiana between them, a family whole and happy. Love didn't count years, it counted courage, and they had that in spades. Hey, what did you think of Lila and Evan's journey? From that wild first night to this beach sunset, they fought for love against all odds. How did their story make you feel? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what stories you want next. Let's keep the magic going.